Hello, everyone, and as always, welcome back to Strategy Gaming Dojo, where we find, learn, and play one more turn of the great strategy games. And today we're going to get back into Gary Grigsby's War in the East 2. This is our quick start tutorial for this game. Now, this is part two of that quick start tutorial, and I'm planning on it being 3 episodes. I'm trying to keep them just to an hour long so you can watch these 3 episodes, jump out on the map, and as always, it's always the best way to learn is to play the game, but I'm just trying to set the table for you so you can open up the game and you have some clue of what's going on, and then you can start figuring out things yourself. Now, if you want more in-depth tutorials, I've done, 15 or 16 episodes of an in-depth tutorial of this game. So if you have certain questions about, specific things, generally, I hope I have those well labeled. So if you want to know something about the air war, or if you want to know something about the ground combat or something like that, we're going to cover those from a very high level. But if you want more specific information, check out those more specific tutorials. Okay, so let's get going. We've got a lot to do, but before we do, I do want to cover a few things. I always like to go back if there was something that I said that was wrong or it was confusing or people had questions about. I want to cover that right up the top so that you have the proper information. Now, one thing I wanted to say is we talked about terrain types out here, and every hex in the game has its own terrain type. And if we hover over here, there we go. I had to click on the screen. You can see this terrain type is clear. Okay, and that's just kind of the base case, base level hex type, right? There's no penalties. There's no, there's nothing different about this. This is the base case. It's clear. And then we talked about certain of these hexes that are what we call rough. All right, and so rough you can kind of think of as hilly. It's hard for armor maybe to get through there or motorized units to get through there. It's a little easier to defend because you have more places to hide, obviously. And so we talked about that. But I did want to point out one other one that I forgot to talk about last time, and that is mountain. And here is mountain. Now, mountain hexes, motorized units cannot go through them. Okay, and you do in this game have specialized mountain units that do get, a bonus in the mountains and in rough for that matter. But I just wanted to point that out because we talked about rough, we talked about, swamp, we talked about light woods, heavy woods. There is mountain, and just keep in mind you can't move motorized units through those. Essentially, they're blocked for motorized units, and it's much slower moving for ground units. Okay, so that's one part of it. Second thing that I noticed myself is, and I did this in the big tutorial, I think that I confused on the theater boxes on the option screen when you first start the game. If you want to control the theater boxes, you check the box. It says player enhanced theater box control. And if you check that, then you're in control of it. Now, I would say after you watch this tutorial, if you're going to jump out on the map, start playing the game, let the AI handle the theater boxes. It's a little, I think, advanced to just when you're first starting out. There's a lot to know there and a lot to kind of start to understand. And the best way to do that is let the AI control these theater boxes. With that said, you're always going to be somewhat in charge of the reserve theater box. And so you'll get used to this box. And once you're used to that one, then later on, when you play the game, you can say, hey, Italy, I understand how these boxes work now. And if you want to bring something on the map from Italy or put it in Italy, for instance, you'll have a much better understanding of that. The third thing is the question came up, why are you on version 1.00000 million O's of this game? Well, that's because Matrix was kind enough to send this game over early, and we've been doing a Let's Play from that original version of the game. Now, much to their credit, that game has not crashed on us yet, and we're on episode 218. I think we're turn 71 or something like that, and the game is held up. So that's much credit to them for the original version of the game. But that being said, so the question came, well, why, what good is this tutorial going to do for me? Now the game's on version like 1.02.41 or something crazy like that. The the basics of this game are going to be identical almost between the two. I mean, 99.8% of what we cover here is identical to the current version of the game. The basics and the basics of gameplay have not changed. And so whatever version that I would have picked to do this tutorial, it's not going to make much of a difference. And if somebody watches this 5 years from now, it's not going to make that much difference. We're hitting the high points of the game. Now there are certain things that have changed under the hood of the game, certainly, and they've worked out some bugs, ironed out some of that stuff, different things people had noticed. But the basics are going to be just pretty much identical. They're almost identical to War in the East 1, except for the air version. Now, some things have changed between War in the East 1 and War in the East 2. This is a much better game, but I just want to tell you, if you're watching this, you say, well, this isn't applicable to me. I'm on version whatever. It doesn't matter. I mean, the basics of gameplay are about the same. All right, let's jump into it. A lot to cover. Now, what did we do last time? Well, we talked, the basics of how to get into the game, what selections to make, and what not to start your game. And then once you're here, which is the start of the game, once it loads up, what are you seeing on the screen? And we talked about breaking news. We talked about the hexes themselves out here. And then we started going across the tabs here. Now, this may go without saying, or it may be a little too obvious for some of you, but I just want to say it again because when you're new to a game and you're just trying to take it all in, maybe sometimes some things that are obvious aren't obvious yet. And that is the map info tab that we went over last time is all of these buttons are about things you can put on the map and see them. Okay, so if we click logistics, now all of a sudden we can see our depots. And if we take that off, now we can't see the depots. If you turn, roads on or roads off, you see that on the map. So we'll turn the roads on. Now you can see the roads. That everything of map info, and I get that that's obvious, but when you're new to a game, maybe it's not right at the top. Anything that you want to see on the map or that can be represented on the map has to do with this map info tab. Okay? And so that's what we covered last time, what to put on the map. Now, if I click roads here, this is how I play. I want to see who controls the hexes. Okay. I want to see the fort levels that have been built, and you can see those here, two twos. You see all these twos along here where the Soviets have dug in a bit. You want to see those fort, or at least I like to see those fort levels. I want to see the delay points that have happened because of battles. When you have a battle in a hex, it leaves delay points, meaning if you move into that hex and you try to get out of it, it's going to cost you that many extra movement points. I like to see that, okay? And then finally, I like to see where the roads are because that's the easiest way to move, generally speaking. All right, so that's what I usually have on the map. Now then, we've moved through all these. We've talked about all of them. What do we have over here? Well, these are what I call the kind of primary air buttons, meaning they're always up here. They don't really have to do with the air orders you give. Instead, they're giving you map information. Okay, and so this map information would be air recon levels. All right, if you wanted to put that out on the map, we could do that. You could look for combat recon and strategic recon. Now, there's two different kinds of recon in this game. There's tactical, where you go look at individual units and you want to know more about them. All right, so you fly some recon missions over them. And then there's strategic recon, which is kind of what maybe you would think it is. We fly out over Riga and we see what kind of production he's got there, right? So you have tactical, which is more the combat. What are we facing across the field from us? Then you have strategic, which is out to the, big industrial centers or over cities, or it can just be over, airfields. You want to know what's on them. That would be strategic recon. And you can put that on the map once we've actually run air missions. What is this? This is air directive targets. So it'll tell you what your targets are. Now, you don't know what an air directive is yet, so it's not going to tell you a whole lot. But once we do know what they are, and you will know after this episode because we're going to cover the air portion of this game later on, you can go and see what your ground targets for bombing are. You can go see what all targets are. Here, this is map flak. Now, if you're not, you know, deep into war games, you may say, what in the world is flak? Flak is anti-aircraft. Okay, anti-aircraft fire is called flak. And flak can come out of two different things. It can either come from a unit where they fire, they've got guns on the ground, they see a plane flying over, and they fire those guns at them. That's flak. All right. So individual units can have flak. Cities or towns can also, well, cities and above can also have flak. And that's one other thing I should mention about the map. And let's go out here. You see Riga? It says Riga 15. Okay, 15 is the population size in this game. And if we go over here to Moscow, for instance, Moscow shows 50. All right, so um, that just gives you the relative, population size, whatever you're over. Pskov is 10. Okay, so that's just population. Um, but then underneath that, you see urban. All right, so there's different levels of urbanization or cities or towns in this game, and I'm naming them all now what they're called. But the smallest of those is called a town. All right, and these little dots on the map here represent towns. Now they don't really do a whole lot in this game. It's like, oh, okay, there's a town here. You'll see it's called Voropevo. It's really just more kind of for historical purposes. You can say, oh, yeah, Voropevo. Okay, sure. Um, that's all that towns do, really. But let's go over Vilnius. What is Vilnius? Vilnius is a city, and a city is the smallest of the urban areas, okay? And so a city is easier to defend. It also generally has a rail, what's called a rail yard level. And we can click on Vilnius up here. If we click on it, you can see what's in Vilnius. Nation Soviet Union, player Soviet, population 14. It has a rail yard in it and manpower. Now, these are production things. We're not going to get deep into that because, in some respects, you don't really need to know much about production in this game. All you need to know really out of production is rail yard. All right. And these rail yards will have a size from 0 to 9. What you're looking for are ones that are over a 1. So a 2, pretty decent. Not bad. Let's go to Moscow. Let's go to Moscow, he says. All right, let's find Moscow. We'll click on this hex, and then you can click right up here and get to Moscow. Soviet Union, Soviet, population 50. You can see all of the production that is going on here. It's got general armaments production. It's producing vehicles, the IL-2 airframe, T-40 chassis. I mean, this game is really incredible when it comes to this, but you just don't really have control of it over it. So it's more of a thing like, wow, that's super interesting, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, other than if you capture Moscow, all of this could get put out of production. Okay. But what does it have? It has a rail yard level 9, and that means it can move a lot of freight and a lot of troops through here. So all you're really worried about on those urban areas, whether they be cities, urban, what's called urban, which was Riga, right? That's urban. So it goes town, city, urban, and then you've got heavy urban. I believe Leningrad's, yeah, here it is. Leningrad is a size 40 for population. It is considered heavy urban. All right. And you may say, well, what difference does this make to me? Well, this makes a difference when it comes to the defendability of this hex. A heavy urban area is going to give you defensive bonuses. Okay, that's kind of what you need to know about it. It's also any of these places are places you could hide armor during the winter to help protect them or to help protect troops during the winter. Just something to keep in mind. Okay, well, now you're like, wait a minute, what just happened? What are we talking about? Let's get back here. The reason I wanted to introduce cities is because cities can have flak themselves. And you see here city flak only or all flak. Well, let's turn city flak only first. And you can see in the different cities, You see an anti-aircraft gun here. They can fire at guns. And I'm not going to go too deep into this other than to say this is the level of low altitude anti-aircraft they have. This is the level of high altitude aircraft. I'm going to leave that to my more advanced tutorial. It just, we could go down that road forever. You can see here Smolensk has a level 1 and 1. Obviously 0 and 0 means it has none. If we go here to Leningrad, you see 1 and 1. If we go back to Moscow, they've actually got 0 and 1 there, 1 and 0 there. But that's what this is representing. If we go to all flak now, whoa, look at all that. You can see the flak levels that the units themselves have. Now, this is an operational level game. So you're playing divisions. Divisions are moving around. So it's not like when you see one of these counters, it's not like just men marching about. There's all the support staff, all the anti-aircraft, the anti-tank. We'll get into all of that in the ground combat section. But each of these units has its own anti-aircraft levels, and you can see that here. So again, this is just running down. These are things you can represent on the map. And then finally, this is show air operational groups. We're going to get into this later in the episode, but when you click on this, now you see your air commands. Think of these as commanders out here that command the air. And we'll get into that as we get into the air section later in this episode. For now, though, we'll turn that off. We'll turn that off. Even though we're in the air planning phase, it automatically comes up when you start the air planning phase. Okay, so that's what these 4 buttons are over here. So that's really map info. Let's go to info screens. And now, as you can see, those primary air buttons go away. I'll call them the map air buttons, really, because they just show you different things you need to know about air warfare on the map. So let's go to info screens. Well, if map info showed everything that was on the map that you could visually represent, info screen shows you all your information. Now look, this is why you pay me the big money, because I tell you things like that. But let's just go down them because you can find every bit of information that you would ever want about this game, what's going on in the game, how it's progressed, etc., from these buttons right up here in the primary ribbon. So let's just go to the first one, and this is your order of battle. All right. It shows you your 4 assault headquarters. This is something that is different in your version of the game. In the original version of this game, you could have up to 6 assault armies, and we'll talk about that when we get to the ground combat section. But now you can only have 4. The developers decided 6 was too many. They backed it off to 4, and they powered up actually the Panzer groups. But that's beyond this discussion. But this is what's showing you up here is what you have designated as your assault headquarters, but we'll get into that later. Then you see OKH. What the hell is OKH? Well, that is the overall German command. Just think of it as, the general staff of the German army. OKH is represented by a counter. It's out on the map, and we'll talk about that when we get out on the map. OKL is the overall air command for the Germans. Okay, Luftwaffe. Gosh, I messed that up. I've said it so many times. Luftwaffe. Okay, Luftwaffe. This is the overall command for German air. All right. It is also represented by a counter on the map. Franz Halder is the general in charge of OKH. Erman Göring is the general in charge of OKL. You then have Hungarian High Command, Romanian High Command, and Slovakian High Command. If you want to drill down, now these are the other Axis countries that you will be controlling at the start. If you want to drill down into the German army, then you can start drilling down. Army Group Center, Army Group North, Army Group South, Second Army, okay? 35th Corps is kind of out on its own for whatever reason. 42nd Corps, same deal. And then you can drill down even farther. What's in Army Group Center? What's in 2nd Panzer? So, you can go all the way down to the division level this way. This gives you the big overall summary of OKH. So this is essentially what the Germans have on the ground for Operation Barbarossa, at least at this moment. 2.9 million men, 27.4 K guns or artillery, and 4,404 lucky fours AFVs or armored fighting vehicles. Okay, so that gives you a big general overall summary. Same for the Hungarians. They've got 423,000 men. The Romanians have 852,000, so on and so forth. You can see the big summary here of men, guns, AFVs, and the three different kinds of aircraft: fighters, bombers, utility. Okay, and utility can either be transport aircraft or they can be recon aircraft. That's utility. Okay, and you can see the three different representations. There are all kinds of different planes in this game, but it all boils down to these three different types, or at least that's how the game represents it. When we get into the air portion, we'll talk a little more about that. You also have a lot of air bases. You could go and look at all the different air bases you have, see how many men are there, how many guns are there, okay? You could also look in the theater boxes, Western Europe, Italy, so on and so forth. This is just a prettier visual representation of all of this information. You can see uh, what is called Germany here. 3.28 million men on map. Okay, 2.9 million of them are directly under the command of OKH. Now, you do have some things that are not commanded directly by OKH, such as OKL, right? That's why 231. Then you have guys on air bases and stuff. That's why this number is higher. But 3.28, this is how much reserve forces you have, and total forces, how many artillery pieces, AFVs, and planes you have, okay? And then you have the Axis allies. So this is the rest of the Axis, whether it be Hungarian, Romanian, or Slovakian, all added together. Then you can see what the Soviets have at the start as well. And so that's your order of battle screen. And you can always come here and kind of drill down into the overall map forces. I must tell you, I don't look at that one that much. There are other ways to get that information that I think are better. The next one along is losses. Okay, so ground losses. And every turn, you can come to this and it'll show you, it'll say, last action, current turn, and it'll show you exactly how many men, guns, and AFVs you lost last turn and how many you've lost total. That they then further break down the men losses into men killed, captured, and disabled in these columns here. And then you can also see the same for the Soviets. So you can kind of get an idea of what's going on out there. Now you can also see in different phases. Now remember, we talked about the phases: logistics phase. Now they've consolidated the air planning and the air execution phase, right? Because air planning phase, nothing happens. So it's logistics, air, and then what I was calling ground phase, but I guess the game calls it action phase. So you can go to the three of the four phases here and see what happened as far as losses go. And this becomes a very interesting screen. And then when you come over here, it will show you exactly, I mean, broken down into very small pieces, what exactly you've lost. How many of this kind of tank have you lost? How many of this kind of plane have you lost here in air losses? And then you'll see destroyed units. These are never getting repaired or coming back. They're gone. They're gone. Therefore, destroyed. All right. So that's what that screen is. This is the production screen. And this will show you how much capacity you have for the production of this game. Now, again, you don't really control production. And so, what is useful on this screen? Well, let's see. You can see different things. You can see how many men are in your pool. This is what you're going to draw off of as men get killed out in your units. The game's going to say, okay, well, let's send some guys from the pool. You can also see how many different aircraft here. You can also see how many different tanks, and you can see this is broken up. It starts with air, all right, and then it goes to ground. So let's say that you really, for whatever reason, you're like, man, I love those Panzer IV tanks. Well, probably because they're the best tank you've got for the most part. How many of those do I have in the pool? Well, 0 to start with, but we do have 31 Panzer IIIs, so that's good. So if some get destroyed, they could be replaced, right? Um, and so this shows you how many were built last time, how many you've stored up in the pool, uh, and then this shows you how many are already in your units, all right? And then it'll show you changes over here, all right? So that look, again, it's the kind of thing, it's all very interesting. How much do you really need to stare at this screen? Probably not that much. I mean, what can become interesting is how many men you have in your reserve pool. Well, I shouldn't call it reserve. Let's call it the production pool, all right? How many men? Now, you may say, how do you produce men? Well, I hope your parents had that talk with you. But for purposes of this game, it's wrapped in under production, even for men. So 361,000, you can almost see how many armaments and oil and whatnot you're producing as well. Again, you don't control it. One thing that can become interesting here is the truck situation, but it's probably a little beyond this, sort of quick start tutorial. So that's production. Then you can see everything in graphs. If you're a visual learner and you like to see everything in graphs, you can see manpower losses, gun losses, AFB losses per turn. So you can see it on a chart here like you're in the accounting department. How many map men do we have? Well, you can see here the axis, us, we start with 4.54 million men. The Soviets start with 2.69. Spoiler alert, the Soviets start going like that, right? They start adding men, but this will show you how many men are on the map in your game. Then you could also see total men. So this includes what's in the theater boxes, right? So this is on turn one and turn two. These will start to change, and you can see all of that as a visual representation. You can see the manpower pool down here. This is kind of the important one in production. How many men you have in the manpower pool. But I always look at losses every turn, and I look at map, not necessarily order of battle. I look at what's actually on the map, what can we move, what can we use. So that's map men. Okay. Um, weather. Weather is incredibly important in this game. There is a dynamic weather system. And each week the weather will change, and you can see the weather on the ground, and here are the different types of weather. You can also see the weather in the air, which becomes very important. So let's click on that and see what's going on. Well, it's raining up here, uh, over Sweden and Norway and Finland and whatnot. It's raining up in this area, and these it's a low pressure system. Like I said, this is a very detailed weather system. This is what is going on in the air at the start of the turn. Okay. This is what's going on in the air at the end of the turn. So you can see at the start of the turn, it's raining up here. And by the end of the turn, that front has moved off. And you can see if we go back to weather on the ground, it's just clear. It's clear on the ground. But up here, you see, because it's raining, you see some light mud up here. And mud can have a very devastating effect on you as the Axis player. But again, I'll let you kind of, deep a little digger, deep a little, dig a little deeper into the weather system in the more advanced tutorial if you're interested in it. But the main thing to keep in mind is winter is its own player in this game. And once you get to October or so, it may start snowing. By the time you get to November, there may be blizzards all over the map, and they really hurt your troops and they hurt your motorized units. So, watch the weather and you'll get the hang of it as things go on. But the weather is very important in this game. This is the reinforcement and transfer button, or yeah, well, I guess it is a button. Reinforcement and transfers. This tells you what's coming on the map, what's going off the map. Now, a lot of these are automatic, but if you do bring in something off the reserves, it will show here, okay? And if you're going to put something back into your reserves, it will also show here. But you get a lot of units just naturally, and they will appear on the map. You can set where you want your reinforcements to come on the map. Some of them, though, do just appear back at Berlin. And so some of the reinforcements will just come in at Berlin. The ones that the game automatically sends to you come in by Berlin. The ones that you bring off the reserves, you can set a hex that you want them to show up. Okay, and so this is just listing on turn 2. The 132nd Infantry Division is a reinforcement. It's coming from where? It'll tell you where it's coming from and where to. Well, onto the map, which is great. And then it'll go to hex 172, 187. If you don't know where that is, click on it and it'll show you. Um, it's this hex right here. All right, so we will be getting a new unit into that hex. And if you hover over it, 172, 187, you can see there by the clear, this is where this unit will come on the map. So it will tell you all of that, all of your reinforcements. You can also, that's just ground units, air groups, AOGs. We'll get into that as we get into the air war. All right. And then you have Commander's Report Screen. Now, arguably, this is the most important screen in the game. It's got the most info. You can go and see every dang bit of information that you would ever want in this screen. Once you get used to it and the search functions down here, you can go find anything. So let's just put it on units. And as you can see, it's going to show every unit that we have from OKH, Army Group Center, that command counter, 2nd Panzer Group command counter. It'll show you what its rank is. And so if we go here, OKH is 5X's, meaning it's the high overall command. Army Group Center is a high overall command, Italian high command, so on and so forth. So, and you can see in orange, actually, I'm not sure. Oh, those are ground units, right? And the blue are air units, I believe. Yeah, and the blue are air units, right? And so this goes down the chain of command if you wanted to do it that way, or you could do it by nationality. You know, if you want to go see all your Slovakian troops, well, here you go. Wow, okay, cool. It's Slovaks. The type of unit, security units, SP gun unit. These are support units, etc., etc. You can find that here. You can search by unit, by headquarters, air leaders, battles, locations, equipment. You can come down here and you can take certain things out. You want to take cavalry units out? Okay, they're gone. You want to take, AA units out? They're gone. You can come down here and search for anything, really. And this commander's report is super helpful. Um, Again, I don't want to keep just beating a dead horse, but I do cover that more in the advanced tutorial. We just don't have time if we're going to quick start this sucker. Logistics phase report. I would suggest you look over this. I'm not going to go deep into it. I don't use it that much. I mean, I will check it out, but you don't need that as you're first starting the game. Then we get into some air buttons right here on the main ribbon. These are your different air doctrines, okay? And these are your air directives. We will cover that, but this is, it's giving you info. It's not putting anything on the screen. It's bringing up another screen to give you information. And we'll talk more about these two in the air, all right? Go to the theater box screen. Okay, you want to go see to your theater box and see exactly what's in each one. If you don't like the visual representation, so let's just take Western Europe. 2nd Panzer Division is over in Western Europe. Well, is that true? I don't know. Let's go look at Western Europe. Go to the ground. We'll go down to armor units, and sure enough, there's 2nd Panzer Division. All right, and so all this button's doing is giving you a text version of this, of your different theater boxes. Victory. This is the victory script. V for victory. This tells you how many victory points you have by holding cities, how many bonuses you've gotten, how many points you've gotten by events, and then you subtract out enemy bonus points and enemy events, what your high water mark is, who's the initiative player, when it will be checked again, what the switch check is. I'm not going to go through all of this other than to say get as many victory points as you can, obviously. But this shows you the cities that you already control. Is that true? Hold on. No. This shows you the cities you already control, right? Yeah, I'm looking. Okay. Yep. In yellow, and then the white are cities where you can pick up victory points. By what turn you have to get to them for bonus, I believe. What turn the Soviets got them? Well, this is the turn that they got them historically, right? And so you can look here, and of course, the Soviets eventually end up in Berlin, and so this tells you what when they got there, and then what the current bonus is for that town. So that is the victory screen. Then we have Wikipedia. They say, what? Wikipedia, if you want to know more about any of your units, generally they have an entry here in Wikipedia. So let's just look at 11th SS Panzer Army. It will give you a full this is the historical record on 11th SS Panzer. Okay, so if you're like, oh, what's this unit? I wonder what they did during the war, etc., etc. You can come here and look at Wikipedia. It's got a lot of great information. I mean, if you're just a lover of history, I'll catch myself sometimes just reading through a bunch of these just to, check them out. It also shows the like the 254th Division. This is their sigil here. Kind of interesting, right? Many of them have their own um, icon, and that's kind of cool. And it'll tell you if it was an Army Group North or Center or South, and what battles they participated in. It's kind of cool. Kind of cool. A lot of information there. Show events. This will just take you to that screen that was on the turn report. And speaking on the turn report, there it is. Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, this takes you to breaking news. My bad. This is breaking news. So if you read breaking news over here and you accidentally get out of that screen, you can always come right back up here on info screens, click on it, and you can read your breaking news again. And then this is the turn summary button right over here, and you can look. Of course, nothing's happened, but I talked about turn summary last time. We'll just kind of pass on by that. All right, so that's really info screens. Now, some of these other buttons will pop up, on the secondary ribbon or over here to the right will be consistent and constant. So I'm not covering them quite yet, but that was info. If we go back to map, so what I've talked about here, anything you can put on the map is on the primary ribbon up here on map info screens, any information you can get from a report or shown in text or in graph format would be right here in info screens. Okay. The final one is admin. This is your basic stuff. Save game. Okay. Hotkeys, yes, we haven't talked about the hotkeys, but you can do most everything with a hotkey in this game if that's how you like to operate. Now, I usually do things with button and with the mouse and whatnot. There are a few I will point out. Z, toggle unit counter info. Always remember this. So if currently you're showing the combat value and how many move points something has on your counters, if we come out here, we'll look at a counter again. If you're showing combat value and movement points on your counters right now, if you hit Z, whoa, what's going on? It'll show you this equal sign. This now shows you offensive combat value and defensive combat value. And if you haven't clicked on anything, it shows you that for the whole stack. All right. Now, if you click on one individually, though, so the headquarters, well, of course, it's a headquarters. It has no attack value or defensive value. Let's click on well, okay, there's only one infantry unit here. Let's go someplace that has two infantry units. Maybe that'll be, well, gosh darn it. Can I just find two dang units stacked on top of each other? There we go. Okay, so if I don't click on this, hey, 69 equals 69. Uh, so it has a 69 offensive value, a 69 defensive value, for the whole stack. If I click on it, this division that lights up is 24 and 24. If we click on this again, this Panzer division is 45 and 45. Now, I'm no mathematician, but if you add 24 to 45, you get 69. And same with the defense. All right. And so the Z hotkey, you're going to be using that a lot because you'll want to see what the offensive and defensive values of your units are. But there's all kinds of things that you can, use the hotkeys for. I'll let you look through that though. So that's the hotkeys. I'm working backwards here. You can go back to your game options here. Some of them you can actually change in game. This is what I was talking about. Enhanced player theater box control. If you click that, now all of a sudden you've got control of all of the theater boxes. If you leave it unclicked, it's really the reserves that you control. Okay. Um, Personal preferences. Again, scroll speed, whatever. If you don't like what's on the unit counters, you can change. I'm not sure why that flipped back to combat, but CV move, that's how I've always got it. And then finally, if you want to get out of the game, you're like, I don't know how to get out of this game. It's here at admin there, and that's it. Those are the tabs. All right, not that complicated, really. I mean, it gives you stuff on the map, gives you stuff in graph and text format, and does the basic functions of the game. I'm going to cover this over here with the ground episode because it has to do with ground units. It's showing this little green notch here is based on what you select here. But we'll get to that next time. This is move to the next phase. And so it's not necessarily in turn, right? If we're in the air planning phase and we click this, it'll say execute air directives. We're going to click no, but it'll still be your turn. If you click yes, it'll do your air directives, but then you still have the what they call the action phase. I sometimes call it the ground combat phase, but this isn't necessarily in turn. Now, when you do hit this at the end of your action phase or ground combat phase, it does end your turn. Then it flips over to the Soviets. So we'll talk about those more as we move on here. And then we've got the secondary, what I'll call the secondary ribbon. But I think we're at 41. I want to keep these a little smaller chunks, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a 4 episode one, but I think, the first one was an hour. This one's about 40 minutes. I'll keep the next two 40 minutes or so, and we'll do 4 episodes. So wow, I've really cut it down from 16 to 4, but I really do think the air episode should probably be self-contained. And so when I come back next time, we'll talk about the secondary ribbon. It's different whether you're in the air planning phase or if you're in the action ground phase. There's different things you can do. So we'll talk about this secondary ribbon next time, and then we'll more generally talk about your air commands and the air portion of this game. So anyway, this has been Strategy Gaming Dojo. I hope you enjoyed this. I know I did. I hope you learned a lot. If you have any questions, make sure you put them down in the comments. Don't be shy. There's a great community that we have on the page. And so somebody, even if it's not me, will get to your question and try to answer it. If you're just like, I have no idea what this is or how to do this, try to put it there if you can. We also have a Discord channel that's very active. You can always put your questions there, and somebody will get back to you. I try to, but if I can't get to it, somebody else will. So when we come back next time, it'll be the air war, and then we'll do the ground combat after that, the action phase ground combat, and talk about units and how you move them and why you move them and what's in them, what are they, the command structure, etc. So anyway, Strategy Gaming Dojo. Talk to you next time. Have a great one.